Hey guys, we're back with Chapter 9 of The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. In the last chapter, the time traveler went down the weird watering well to discover the creepy creatures. Chapter 9, The Terrible Truth. At last, I reached the bottom and found a narrow tunnel in the wall. Full of painful arches, I curled up to rest. I don't know how long I lay there before I was startled by a soft hand touching my face. Quickly striking a match, I saw 3 of the white creatures bending over me. The sudden brightness sent them off. They didn't seem to be afraid of me, but the light terrified them. They reminded me of the fish that live in the underwater darkness, whose pupils too are abnormally large and sensitive and reflect light. Now, from dark gutters and tunnels, the Morlock's eyes were glaring at me in the strangest way. I tried talking to them, but found their language completely different from the Eloy's. Face it, I told myself. You're in this alone, and you better start moving. Feeling my way around the tunnel, I heard the noise of an engine running some kind of machinery. As I walked along, the noise grew louder. When I reached a large open space, I struck another match and discovered myself in a vast arched cavern. I have only a hazy impression of what I glimpsed before the match went out. Ghostly Morlocks were lurking with the table with some machinery and sort of white table with some kind of meal on it. Rather large animal stood in the center. I wondered what large animal had survived in this world to furnish the red meat I saw. The place was stuffy, with little air, and was in this open space had the smell of fresh blood. Fool, I thought to myself, how could you have come on a trip like this with no weapons, no food, no medicine? If only I thought to bring the camera, I would have been able to take quick shots and study them later at my own leisure. Here I stood like an idiot, with none of these basics and only 4 matches left. I'd wasted half the box in showing off to the little people in the upper world. Suddenly a hand touched mine and the cold fingers brushed my face. The unpleasant smell of the Morlocks and the sound of their breathing told me that there was a crowd of them around me. Soon I felt the box of matches being gently pulled from my hand, and the others began plucking at my clothing. Let's go, you fiendish things. Get away now! My shouting made them draw back briefly. But they approached me again, more boldly than before, and their whispering and queer laughing noises frightened me horribly. I struck another match, hoping its glare would help me escape. Luckily, I was able to stretch the life of the flame with a scrap of paper I found in my pocket, and I made my way to the tunnel before burning paper went out. In the blackness, I could hear the Morlock pattering after me. Soon, I was being clutched by several clammy hands trying to haul me back. I lit another match and waved it in the dazzled faces. How nauseatingly inhumane they looked with their pale, chinless faces and big, lidless, pinkish gray eyes. I kept moving and had to strike my 3rd match to reach the opening of the shaft. As I groped for the projecting bars, my feet were groped from behind and I felt myself being tugged violently backward. Desperately, I lit my last match, and in the brief second before it went out, my hand had reached the climbing bar. Kicking with all my might, I freed myself from my grasp of the Morlock and began to climb speedily up the shaft, leaving the ape-like creatures peering up at me. The climb seemed endless, and with only about 20 feet to go, I began to feel dizzy. Oh no, I prayed. Please don't let me pass out. Now, I really had to struggle to keep my hold on the bars and not faint. My head swam and I felt like falling sensation a few times. Finally, after what seemed like forever, I climbed over the mouth of the well and staggered into the blinding sunlight. I fell upon my face. Even the soil smelled sweet and clean. I remembered a faraway feeling that Weena was kissing my hands, and a dim impression that the other Eloy voices were nearby. Then, I blacked out. When I came to, Weena was chanting to herself, bad times, bad times, bad times coming. What do you mean, I asked. Bad times coming. Bad times? What bad times? Old moon go away. Old moon leave us. But there will be a new moon, little warrior. New moon no good. New moon never good for Eloy. Weena, why are you so upset? She shuddered. Dark night, she whispered. She seemed so disturbed, I didn't continue the conversation further. I guessed, though, that the sickening Morlocks were at the bottom of her fear and wondered what evil acts they did under the new moon. Those Morlocks, I was their enemy now, too, and I had to think how to protect myself against them. Clearly, I needed a good weapon and a safe place to sleep. All the buildings and trees I checked in my wanderings seemed to be easily reachable by the Morlocks. I knew too well what great climbers they were. Then, the tall spires of the palace gleamed portly, and as I climbed, as I called the oriental-looking building. Then a gleam of its polished walls and back to my memory. That afternoon, taking Weena upon my shoulders like a small child, I headed up. After a while, Weena asked me to get down. She ran alongside me. "Take pretty flowers," she said, stopping every now and then to pick them. Weena putting them in special flower places now. I had to smile. Weena had always had a puzzled look over those strange places in my clothing. The pockets. Finally, in a sudden flash of insight, she knew their purpose. Pockets were a funny kind of vase, of course, and that's where she placed the flowers at this point. Here. The time traveler broke off his story and addressed the guest in his smoking room directly. In changing my jacket a while ago, I reached into my pocket and found these. He put his hand into his pocket and silently placed 2 large withered white flowers on the table. He stared at them thoughtfully a while. The anxious guests all remembered their promise not to interrupt, so they waited patiently until he continued. Instead of Green Jade building being 8 miles away, as I had estimated, it was more like 18 miles away. In addition, the heel of one of my shoes was loose and a nail was working its way through the sole of another. This, combined with a swollen ankle, forced me to discard my shoes and walk in my socks. We ate food we found going along our way, and we continued walking toward the Palace of Green Portland. We rested for time as night came on, and as I was guarding the sleeping Weena from undergrounders, my thoughts turned to the people in this future world. Then suddenly, the terrible truth hit me about the Morlocks and the Heli. Oh no, I thought. It's horrible to leave, yet it all fits together like pieces in a puzzle. The Morlocks tendering machinery underground, the Morlocks supplying the Eli with clothes and food, the Eloi fear of the Morlocks in darkness, and that slaughtered animal I'd seen on the table in the cavern. It could only mean one thing. The Morlocks raised the Eloi like cattle and used them for their food supply. The Morlocks were cannibals! That's it for Chapter 9 today. Catch us on this channel for Chapter 10, and as always, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. That's all.